Good evening and welcome to the fifth lecture in the IKS lecture series organized by Forum for Applied Philosophy along with Vidyasagar University Philosophy Alumni Association. Today is Teachers' Day. In India, teachers are considered as the bearer of Gyananjan Sholaka. It is said that Agyano Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Urmilitang Jeno Tasmai Sri Gurave Namo. Today, who is with us with that Gyananjan Shalaka is Professor Nilanjan Bhowmick of Delhi University. Professor Nilanjan Bhowmick is a golden offspring of Delhi University itself. Only PhD he did from a globally recognized University of America, University of Connecticut. After 2 years at St. Stephen's College, he joined Delhi University as Assistant Professor of Philosophy from 2015 onwards. He is working as Assistant Professor there with immense dynamism. He has some special interest in epistemology, logic and analytic philosophy. Although he teaches many other subjects, many other topics, some of which are interdisciplinary too. Up to now, 3 scholars have been awarded PhD under his supervision and about 5 students are doing PhD under his direct supervision. He has, to his credit, more or less 20 publications in journals and anthologies. He has, in last 3 years, more than 32 academic meeting, what we say, attending seminars, conferences, etc., both at the national level and also international level. With these few words, I will request Professor Nilanjan Bhowmick to begin his lecture. Thank you, sir.
Everyone can see the PowerPoint. So as I said before, I am a child of the Enlightenment. So I do have, when I am presenting this, you should keep that in mind, because my views regarding the Enlightenment from the age of 17 maybe, today I am above 50 of course, but from the age of maybe 16 or 17, I have been quite convinced by the notion of, maybe before also, of the notion of what is called radical enlightenment, and I will say something about that. I have not actually spent much time thinking about Indian enlightenment, but I did give it some thought after Professor Santosh Pal asked me to think about it. And so I looked at some books and some articles that and tried to figure out something, but I did have very small time to actually prepare. So I hope that I can do justice to the topic, but whatever I will say, I also believe it. It is not like I am presenting something for the sake of presentation. I believe it. It may sound very strange to you when I say it, but I do believe it. Also, I should say at the beginning that I don't actually think that there has been anything called Indian Enlightenment. I'll try to show why that is. There have been attempts at it. It's not like there is no attempt. There have been attempts, but they have fizzled out. But mind you, European Enlightenment is also in the same situation. So let's start with a general framework of the Enlightenment. Enlightenment কি জিনিস হয় সেটা আমাদের একটু বুঝতে হবে, and this is my own view of what it is, but it obviously draws from various historical sources. অনেক কিছু পড়ে টোড়ে আমি যা বুঝেছি সেটাই আমি বলছি এটা। So, the general framework is this: by enlightenment, I will mean all or at least two of the following. At least two টা খুব important হচ্ছে কিন্তু। So one হচ্ছে যে এই individual emancipation. তো আমরা যদি what it means largely is freedom from authority. So I do not want my thinking to be influenced by authorities. I want to think on my own. যেরকম Kant বলেছিলেন, Kant said that one should dare to think for oneself. Kant is one of the last thinkers of the Enlightenment. So after him, or rather at the time he was alive, the French Revolution happened. That kind of is the historians take it as the end of the Enlightenment. After the French Revolution goes on till 1792 maybe, and then the Enlightenment officially ends and the beginning of the post enlightenment period begins. এগুলো হিস্টোরিক্যাল ব্যাপার আছে, তো এর মধ্যে লড়াই ঝগড়া অনেক আছে হিস্টোরিয়ানদের মধ্যে, সে ঠিক আছে। But individual emancipation is a very important thing, but by that we mean something specific. আমার individual emancipation এ মানে মোক্ষ বা এইসব কিছু না। It means freedom from authority. So it just means that I do not follow my teacher or my guru, or I follow my own path and my own thinking, and that is what it really means, and nobody interferes with that. So people don't scold me for following my own path. So that's something vaguely, that's what it means. So then social emancipation has to be there. That was very important, by the way, for the enlightenment thinkers, and we'll come to the enlightenment thinkers shortly. So social emancipation is that there has to be equality amongst people. Everyone's dignity has to be recognized. People should be free. There should be liberty. Sexual and racial equality হওয়া উচিত. It should not be the case that women are discriminated or somebody else is discriminated. No, not like that. I know that it took a very long time for women to get the vote and things like that. But the Enlightenment pushed this idea that women are equal to men and they should be treated so. There are differences amongst Enlightenment thinkers about this, so, and also about racism. So, but largely speaking, this should, what I am not saying that this is entirely historically drawn. This is what it should mean actually, what enlightenment is supposed to mean. So then there is political emancipation. So we have individual emancipation, social emancipation, political emancipation. So naturally there should be democracy. People should have rights. There has to be a tolerance of creeds also. So it's not like I should be an intolerant person. So if you tell me, no, I don't believe anything you say, I should not say, no, I don't want to talk to you. No, I should be a very tolerant person, listen to other people. I should employ what is called public reason. I should be able to speak to others and listen to others. And if you give me good reasons, I should be convinced by it. And so the word reason is used here, which is probably the most important word in enlightenment. So scientific emancipation should be there. What I mean by this is that you investigate nature through reason and experiment, and not myth, superstition, magic, and miracle, sacrifices, propitiation, etc. So the pre-modern thinking is that by making a sacrifice, or by propitiating the gods, or by superstition, magic, miracle, nature has to be somehow made friend of ourselves. Because generally people see nature as something mysterious, so you try to make it friendly by going through all these processes. But science does not do that. It takes nature as well, open to experimental inquiry and open to reason. This is what philosophers also do. They take nature to be open to reason. It's not necessarily the case that nature is open to reason, but that we all know, that's fine. But it is part of the enlightenment tradition that we must use reason and experiment to understand anything. It doesn't matter. It could be society, it could be economics, it could be psychology, it could be anything. So we have to use reason and experiment to figure out the truths of nature and of society and of human beings or of anything else. So myth, superstition, miracle, magic, Bible, Ved, that's not going to be of any help. We have to reject those notions. We can use them, but if there is anything reasonable in them, that's fine. We should use that. So Enlightenment thinkers were influenced by classical period in the Greeks basically. So these are the four requirements of an enlightenment. So I'm not saying that these requirements are ever met, but they are. It seems like these are the minimum requirements, and certainly they have existed in history. So one is individual emancipation, second social emancipation, third is political emancipation, which is scientific emancipation. I think it's perfectly obvious by now to all of you that Indian enlightenment has never happened because we have never had more than one of these. But anyway, let's go ahead. So now there are two common themes to the enlightenment in these areas, whether it is India or the West, that doesn't matter. Firstly, it is not easy to achieve enlightenment as mentioned in the framework. It's very difficult to have, let's say, individual emancipation, but also social emancipation. So if you are a person who is free from authorities, well, you will not be so easily accepted in society. If you have social emancipation, there will be some other problem. Maybe there will be some political problem. Maybe scientific emancipation is not there. If you have scientific emancipation, often it is accompanied with war and rebellion and this and that, all kinds of things. So it is not easy to have enlightenment. This idea that is very easy to have, we should abandon it immediately. But the enlightenment has powerful enemies, and most of the times they have prevailed. So European enlightenment, though there was powerful thinkers supporting it, and it was a very powerful philosophical movement, scientific movement. It was even a movement amongst political thinkers. All these people, with all their thinking, were not able to shake the power structure so easily, but they were able to achieve at least something. But the power structures were always against it, as is perfectly obvious from European history. One just has to turn the pages and see what happened. So things were pretty bad post the French Revolution. Many people, by the way, confuse the Enlightenment with something like a English Enlightenment. The English have always been against Enlightenment, and we should remember. Uh, the English are different from the Enlightenment structure. They have some thoughts which are interesting, but I wouldn't say that they were directly influenced by the Enlightenment. Of course, there was some influence, but not much actually. So, but we'll come to this. So, now, let's start with European Enlightenment. I'll come to Indian Enlightenment. So, European Enlightenment, there are two branches. দুটো ব্রাঞ্চ আছে, কনজারভেটিভ এনলাইটেনমেন্ট অ্যান্ড একটা হচ্ছে র্যাডিক্যাল এনলাইটেনমেন্ট। আরেকটা আছে কিন্তু যেটাকে বলে কাউন্টার এনলাইটেনমেন্ট, তো ওটাকে আমি এখানে নিচ্ছি না। So, conservative enlightenment is that there are these thinkers: Newton, Locke, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Hume. Hume is also there. Adam Smith, these kind of people. So, conservative enlightenment মানে হচ্ছে they do believe in democracy. They believe in individual liberty. They believe that people should have rights. Uh, but they also believe that monarchy is good. They don't necessarily have to follow democracy. Monarchy ঠিক আছে, aristocracy is very fine. We don't necessarily have to bother our heads with common people. So as long as some right is given, some freedom is given, some liberty is given, the rest of the things we can maintain the political structure, but we can also give liberty to people. That was the basic idea of the conservative enlightenment. It was pretty advanced even for its time. It's like it sounds rather odd to us because they support the aristocracy and the monarchy. Remember, Voltaire did not want the French king to be deposed when the French Revolution happened. That's why the French king was killed in 1792, but not in 1789. He was very much in power at that time. Well, he's not much power, but he was there. So that's the conservative enlightenment. These people are extremely influential, of course. So Newton, Locke, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Hume, Adam Smith, tremendously influential people. But they were not necessarily against imperialism, colonialism, or owning vast amounts of property. So Locke said it's fine. You go to America, get as much property as you want. Property is something that you have to, by your hard work, you get it and whatever. So American Indians, for instance, they don't have to appreciate the conservative Enlightenment people because these guys are to some extent responsible for a lot of very bad things that have happened in the colonized countries. There is also what is called the radical enlightenment. This is the enlightenment that's really interesting. So this has what a number of figures, not just English figures and some minor French figures, huge number of them from in Denmark, France, even Russia, for instance. Many other countries are involved in this. Germany, for instance, very important contributor to the radical enlightenment. So this has figures like Pierre Bayle, for instance, Fontenelle, Diderot. So the Holbach, Condorcet, and many German and Dutch thinkers. All these people, very different they were. In what sense are they different? Well, they don't believe in colonialism, imperialism, the spread of Christianity. They don't believe all these things. They have a very clear idea that people should have liberty, they should have freedom, and aristocracy and monarchy has to go. So these people were very clear about the notion of democracy. The conservative enlightenment was not clear about it. They said, yeah, okay, if you want it, have it. If you don't want it, doesn't matter. Aristocrats can still be in power. So, but the radical enlightenment was dead opposed to this notion that religion and aristocracy and theocracy and the Bible and this and that these should be believed, that should just be rejected. A lot of this flows from Spinoza, by the way. So I didn't know this. আমি একটা আর্টিকেল পড়েছিলাম জনাথন ইসরায়েলের, খুব ভালো আর্টিকেল ওটা। ইটস অন দ্য র্যাডিক্যাল এনলাইটেনমেন্ট অ্যান্ড it's an excellent article that actually revealed much to me. So the conservative enlightenment, we have already talked about this. They argued for individual liberty, rights to property and tolerance, but they were in favor of a monarchy and aristocracy. What is he? Conservative. Very. Indeed, Newton was a highly conservative person. So even though he was a man of science, but he was highly conservative when it came to social emancipation. So he may be scientifically emancipated, but he was not socially emancipated. So Jonathan Israel writes of the radical enlightenment. This is the enlightenment that's actually the most interesting. So that what they believed in was the improvement of human life inescapably involves emancipating men from the collective force of autocracy, intolerance, and prejudiced thinking. and establishing a predominantly secular morality. No less than it involves promoting the ideals of equality, sexual and racial, democracy, individual liberty, and comprehensive tolerance. So the radical enlightenment was against colonialism, racism, slavery, and imperialism. That's very important. The conservative enlightenment people were never they were never clear about this matter. So if you are engaging in racism or colonialism or imperialism or slavery, they were not necessarily, they would not condemn you. But the radical enlightened people were very clear in their minds about these matters. How do we know this? So one evidence is that the Japanese at one time, when Pierre Bayle was when he was around, the Japanese had kicked out Christian missionaries from their country. The Christian missionaries were trying to convert the Japanese, so the Japanese just kicked them out. So Pierre Bayle had written an article praising the Japanese that they have done the right thing by kicking out the Christian missionaries. That is amazing if you think about it. Because Pierre Bayle is a European, why should he do that? He should be condemning the Japanese, but he didn't do that because he's a member of the radical enlightenment. He does not believe that people should be, converted and religion has to go there and here and make a mess of everything. No, he doesn't believe because he just doesn't believe. He's a believer in God. I think he was an interesting kind of skeptic, but. Bale is much disregarded, but actually he really was a very influential guy. But he was a very open-minded person, very liberal in his thinking, and very much a protector of human rights and freedom and liberty, and dead against slavery and racism and colonialism and imperialism. So, okay, now the pushback. So, post the French Revolution, there was a massive backlash against the Enlightenment, and it continues to this day, obviously. So, you look at all the governments in Europe or government in America, for that matter, our own government, we are always pushing back against the Enlightenment. That's fairly standard, actually. So, it doesn't matter where you are, there will always be a pushback against Enlightenment because aristocratic privileges are threatened by Enlightenment. So anybody who is privileged is always going to fight against the Enlightenment. Anybody who is not privileged and is a subaltern or is not wealthy or something or does not have the social status, well, they will always fight for enlightenment, and the privileged people will always fight against it. So, and the privileged people are in power. So somehow or other they manage to be in power. So they always fight against it, and there is a lot of support for anti-enlightenment thought amongst the postmodernists, but and also amongst many Indian intellectuals as well. So most of the teachers I speak to in colleges and elsewhere also, they always are praising postmodernism and they're condemning reason, and they say science is useless, it is all for authority and power, and that science is a social construct. I don't know what that is supposed to mean. Of course, it's a social construct, but that doesn't mean that there is nothing objective in it. That's just silly. But everything is a social construct, but that doesn't demand. It doesn't say that nothing is objective. That doesn't make any sense at all. But anyway, this is what the postmodernists say, and it's very popular. You can see in India, most people who are in colleges and universities and teachers everywhere, they're always praising it. I'm an exception. So to some extent, actually, I don't deserve to be called anywhere because I'm not a teacher in that sense. Because I don't believe in this strange postmodernist doctrine. But that's because I believe in the radical enlightenment. So the use of reason has been condemned roundly, and it has been condemned in India also. Let us not forget that. And the use of science has been seen with suspicion as an expression of power. Yeah, but that's just a pushback by the aristocrats. That's all it is essentially. And the intellectuals help them out. They may not want to help them, but they do help them. Okay, let's turn to Indian enlightenment. What's going on here? So in India, we have had scattered chances at enlightenment. So you would imagine that India is a very enlightened country. So we have so many philosophies. We have Buddhism, Jainism. We have had King Ashoka, for instance, very enlightened monarch at one time of his career, not always. But yeah, right. It's like we have had. It seems on the surface that that's the case, but of course, the surface reality is the appearance and the reality are completely distinct. So India has had its chance at enlightenment. They're very scattered, and it's not. It's really hard to say whether we have really had any enlightenment period at all. Remember that in the general framework, I said that you need two things, not just one. So if you have individual emancipation, that's not enough. If somebody says, no, we are going for moksha and nirvana and this, and yeah, that's not enough for enlightenment. And that's in any case not relevant for enlightenment. So, but if you wish to even grant that, let me grant that. It doesn't follow from that we have had an enlightenment period at all. All right. So, we have never really had an enlightenment as I have marked it out here. So I agree with the scholar Gail Ombet, who is a sociologist, who was, she is passed away now, that there have been two moments of enlightenment in India. So there are two moments of enlightenment. So one is the rise of Buddhism, and the second, the rise of the Bhakti movement, what is called the radical Bhakti movement. From the 14th century to the 17th century. This is written in a very interesting book by Gail Ombet called Seeking Begumpura. Begumpura is a utopian society imagined by Sant Ravidas. So this book is actually republished. So I'm not sure when it was originally published. The book doesn't say so. So it simply says 2024. But the book is quite interesting. I found it just about like a week back. I didn't even know this book existed, but I found it a week back in a bookshop and I bought it immediately because I realized that this is something quite interesting. So, Gail Ombet believes, and I think she is right, that there are two moments of enlightenment in India where we had a chance, not much of a chance, but it is a chance. One was Buddhism, and one is the Bhakti movement. But why are they enlightening movement? Obviously, you have to think, why are they enlightening movement? What's the big deal about them? Why should we think they are enlightening? Why not something else? Why not Vedanta or Mimamsa or something? What's the wrong with those guys? So, okay, the main element of enlightenment in India, if we have ever had it, and we have had chances at it, not that we never had a chance, is the challenging of the Hindu Brahmanical order, which for short I will call HBO. So, the Hindu Brahmanical order is not easy to understand. It doesn't depend upon God and temple. That's not like that. They are also there, but it's not like that. It's a sort of strange notion that it's not strange really. It's quite standard in the West and the East and everywhere in the pre-modern age that the cosmos and the society kind of reflect each other. So this is what is called a cosmopolis. So Stephen Toulmin has a book on this called Cosmopolis. So he's not talking about the Hindu Brahmanical order. So the cosmopolis essentially says that there are certain ideas that are enshrined in the cosmos. That's how the cosmos runs, and we are part of the cosmos. So these ideas are also enshrined in our lives. The cosmos runs, or rather, our lives run on the notion of karma, and there is something called rita, and there is something called dharma. And these are binding forces on a human being as much as they are on everything else in the world. And so, therefore, uh, when we implement the Hindu Brahmanical order, the striation into castes begins because apparently the original Purush was divided into three, four castes or something like that. So, since the cosmic order of division has to be followed, therefore the social order has to follow the cosmic order. That's what a cosmopolis means. It means that the social order of society follows the cosmic order. But that does not mean that this is ordained by God or anything. That's not the idea behind the Hindu Brahmanical order. Right? It's not ordained by God. So, but it is just a question of there is a cosmic order and there is a social order. They sort of mirror each other. It's a nice idea. There's nothing particularly wrong with it, except that the wrong ideas are implemented because we don't know what the cosmos is. So we just have an idea about the cosmos, a social idea, and we implement it. And the social ideas are all pretty bad. So enlightenment in India means challenging the Hindu Brahmanical order. The Buddhists challenged it. As they said, this system of castes that exist surely is wrong, but they also had to live with these people, right? So they had to live with the Hindu Brahmanical order, and they were pretty they just mixed and intermarried and whatever with all these people. So the Buddhists, while they were separate from the Hindu Brahmanical order and they worked very hard to create their own identity, they were part of a system, but they were separate from them. They were called heretics by the Brahmins. They said that these people are crazy, whatever. And I think Patrick Oliver has said that the Dharma Shastras were written to protect Hinduism from the evil influence of Buddhism, because the Buddhists believe that you can seek Nibbana even when you are a adolescent. So suppose I'm like, I'm what is it, 15 years old. Well, I can be an ascetic. The Hindu Brahminical order does not conceive of life like that. There are certain stages in life, what is called Varnashram Dharma, and you follow those stages. And when you get old, okay, then you do something, whatever. But the Buddhists entirely turned everything over. Moreover, the Buddhists gave equal treatment to females. So they had female nunneries and male Sangha was there as well. It was opposed by the initially, but the Buddha said no. It makes no sense to have to reject women and that they cannot have Nibbana or something like that. That's just nonsense. Mind you, in the Mahayana Buddhism, I'm speaking of Hinayan Buddhism here. In Mahayana Buddhism, there are certain problems they have. So they do say that a woman cannot have enlightenment, but later on, when she is born as a man, then she can have enlightenment. This is not part of the original Hinayan tradition. But the Mahayana tradition, which is kind of corrupted by the Hindu Brahminical system, it sort of changes its picture. Indeed, Mahayana is quite interesting actually. There are lots of myths and interesting structures of time exist there. It's quite an interesting construct as a historical matter of interest. I'm not saying it is interesting in some abstract sense. It's just interesting as a historical object. So, the Buddhists challenged the Brahminical order. They were reasonably successful in maintaining their presence for something like 1,000 years in India. More than 1,000 years, I think, about 1,100 years, something like that. So 500 BC, let's say, to 650 BC, something like that, maybe some 1,000 years. So 1,100 years. That's a huge, long period. Even by the time Huan Sang arrived in India, uh, he did not find the he found the Buddhist influence to be receding quite rapidly. Of course, Nalanda was there, but it's not like Nalanda was flourishing and what they were, but it was not the old thing that they were. I mean, they were in decline at that time. But thankfully, they had support from the kings and the real powerful structures at that time. But those powerful structures were shifting towards Brahminism very, very quickly. It is important to understand that Brahminism essentially means that society is divided into various castes, and nobody in the world can break these castes. And so, therefore, it is inherently an exploitative system. And it's one of those unusual systems. And many people think that there is a kind of infinite hierarchy inside Buddhism, inside Hinduism. So the Buddhists were already in retreat by 600 AD, and their enlightenment is not necessarily social emancipation. They are quieter people. They don't want some great social revolution and everybody should have rights. It's not like that. It's not a political movement. They have to take support, just like Brahmins took support from the kings. And so the Buddhists and the Brahmins were both supported by the Guptas and whoever were in power. They would give huge money and huge land to these people. So the Buddhists were as much in support, or they had to take support from these kings. Everybody was dependent on them. And so they could not have done anything about it really. So that is why they don't look for political revolution or anything like that. They are not interested in all this. They're just kind of interested in their own philosophical systems, and they are very complicated indeed. So it'll take a lifetime to study Buddhism. It's quite complex. So, but the Buddhists were they were in decline by 650 AD, and they were never able to really uh, uh, create a major dent in the Hindu Brahminical order. They were never able to do this. It is a dent, yes, but the Hindu Brahminical order was very good in co-opting some ideas from the Buddhists, creating various philosophical schools to battle with the Buddhists. They did a good job with that, actually, I must say. And and of course, writing the Dharma Shastras and everything, trying to organize the society in such a way so that it can fight back the heretical influence of the Buddhists and the Jains as well. But anyway, so the Buddhism was a very, very powerful emancipatory movement because they really believed in equality and dignity of everybody, and they believed in equality of men and women. There were no castes in their system. So they did not believe in some of the fundamental tenets of the Hindu Brahminical order. But they did believe in things like Nibbana and Karma and whatever that. So that these are like odd aspects of Buddhism that I wish they could give them up. But then if they gave it up, that there is no Buddhism left. So there are some interesting efforts nowadays to some Western scholars are making efforts to see that can we practice Buddhism without these ideas of rebirth or karma or anything like. Can we actually practice Buddhism without these ideas? But that's a different issue. So, and I think some Chinese Buddhists and Japanese Buddhists have actually done. There's been a lot of change in Buddhism. Buddhism was our greatest export actually. So, apart from our mathematics and astronomy, which really traveled across the world, Buddhism traveled across the world. So, if you want to speak of Indian knowledge systems, our mathematics, our astronomy, sculpture, painting, and Buddhism, they all traveled together with the merchants across the world, across Asia and Middle East and Roman Empire and whatever. We were indeed very, very powerful culturally, very, very powerful indeed. The Hindu system of the Varna system didn't really travel across the world. So, for a very good reason, I guess, nobody really understood what the system was and it didn't make any sense to anyone. So, they didn't adopt the system. So, it's kind of interesting that Bali, Indonesia, Vietnam, all these people have a strong Brahminical presence came to dominate there after, later on, not like early on. But they never really they did take Indian sculpture, Indian art, Indian mythology, even Indian mythology, but they never took the caste system. So the Hindu Brahminical order never really invaded them, but Hindu ideas did invade them. And that's kind of interesting to see that history if you really think about it for a while. But anyway, so that's the first enlightenment, but it's, remember, it is not a, it's not very successful. It is successful but only in a very narrow domain. It is very influential on kings, which is fine, but the Buddhists are not interested in political revolution. They are not terribly interested in social emancipation because they spend all their times in prayer and cutting out bad karma and things like that. So they don't really have time for all these things. Getting Nibbana is hard enough. So okay, that's fine. But Buddhism indeed is a very powerful. Why is it emancipatory? Because it challenges the Hindu Brahminical order. That's the main idea. You can't be fighting for enlightenment in India unless you challenge the Hindu Brahminical order. This idea is, by the way, contained in an article by Meera Nanda. It's called what is it called? I think it's called "Breaking the Spell of Dharma." It's in Economic and Political Weekly, 2001. It's available on JSTOR. You can look at it. So the second idea is the radical bhakti movement. Some people actually say that the radical bhakti movement, uh, it actually okay, Buddhism I have covered, so I don't want to spend time on this. This just says that the Buddhism, I mean, they did what they did, but it's not like, it's not the thing that we want in enlightenment. So yes, they are very successful, extremely powerful in their influence. You look at Korea, Japan, China, incredible influence, incredible. But their influence, surprisingly, in India is not very high. That's actually quite surprising if you think about it for even 2 seconds. We are the creators of Buddhism, but it doesn't have much influence. Maybe in philosophy departments it has, that's fine. But in general public, hardly anything. So, so far as the Buddhist enlightenment is concerned, which is pretty narrow to begin with, and it's not terribly different from. It just uses certain Brahminical ideas and exploits them differently. But beyond that, well, nothing much else. Philosophically very astute, philosophically very powerful, but not the enlightenment we want. At least it doesn't fit the general framework I suggested. Okay, so you look at the radical bhakti movement. So the bhakti movement, some say, was influenced by the remnants of Buddhism. Now people say all kinds of things. Actually, it's very unclear why the bhakti movement emerged. But it seems to me that it's actually perfectly obvious. There have been repeated attempts in India to fight the Hindu Brahminical order, the HBO. People have fought and fought and fought against it because obviously the people who are not Brahmins tend to fight against it. People who are underprivileged tend to fight against people who are privileged, and it is not a question of wealth here. It is a question of something quite strange and different, very difficult to grasp the caste system. I don't know, hundreds of scholars have tried it, and it seems to me that there is consensus that everybody has failed. So I think Karl Marx said this, that Indian caste system will disappear with the railways. Once the railways is there, all caste will disappear. But it didn't happen. On the contrary, it has got stronger. So Karl Marx was clearly wrong about it. So it some people say that the Bhakti movement started because of what is called Sahajiya Buddhism. Uh, as the Buddhists left India, there are some remnants left here and there in North India, some in South India, and apparently they followed what is called Vajrayana Buddhism, and so therefore this influenced these people who actually are members of what is called the radical bhakti movement. Now, one problem with this radical bhakti movement is that our documents regarding them are not terribly strong. So there are these unusual people who suddenly are against idolatry. They are against the Brahminical order. They find untouchability a very strange doctrine. They think that not being able to enter a temple is an absurdity, and so therefore they reject the very notion of a temple. So Basava did that in South India. So, and he was very influential. He was himself a Brahmin, and he served the king, but he turned against the Brahminical order completely. So he encouraged people to fight against it, and surprisingly enough, the king was assassinated actually because he made a Brahmin and an untouchable marry each other. So their movement was a failure. But Basava is influential. It's not like he's not influential. People have heard of him, and he was tremendously powerful in his poetry and his cultural influence. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, sure, we don't necessarily get to hear about him every day, but at that time he had some influence. Where these people have emerged from seems to be fairly clear, not necessarily from the influence of Buddhism or from the, some people say these radical bhakti movement emerged from Islamic influence. That's also very unclear. We don't have any documentary evidence of this. Also, they don't mention Islamic influences in their poetry. So if there is no historical evidence of this, it's very hard for us to justify these matters. There are other people, of course. So there are these people in the south, and then we have Kabir and Tukaram and Sant Ravidas. All these people have unusual doctrines. So, in what sense are they unusual? They reject the notion of dharma and moksha, and they just reject all these things. And they say that we should just believe in equality, and people should sometimes they also believe that people should eat together. An interesting thought, but that's what they used to believe. They are against idolatry and all, and they were even against the existence of temples, for instance. They reject multiple gods, for instance. So Basava, for instance, accepted Shiva, but he did not accept any of the other. He said all the other gods are rubbish. I don't care about them. So they have these interesting thoughts which are clearly very close to something like a radical enlightenment. They believe strongly in the liberty of the individual, freedom from authority. They also believed in gurus, but this may be a kind of Brahminical interpretation of them. That's quite possible. We are listening to Tukaram and Kabir and Ravidas and all these people from a certain interpretative angle today. And this interpretative angle generally comes from the Brahminical scholars. So there are some German and French scholars also who have worked on them, and there is a fair amount of division of opinion amongst them as to exactly how to receive these people. But they were clearly against influences of the Vedas and this kind of strange idea of caste system. They were totally against all this. So there have been movements in India which are very strongly against the Brahminical system, but they have not met with much success. Of course, these people are very influential. Everybody sings Tukaram's bhajans. People sing Kabir songs. There is some interesting problem regarding Kabir songs, regarding the authenticity. Like, did Kabir actually compose them, or did somebody else compose them? The notion of an authorship is not particularly strong amongst these wanderers and minstrels, right? So it's just like a bow singer. He doesn't have to say that I am the author of the song. He doesn't really care about that. Uh, they just sing. They compose the song. They sing. If somebody else changes a line in it, they are fine with that. So that is what has happened to Kabir actually, and to Garam and many others. People have changed and changed and changed and changed the lines, and so keeping the spirit alive. And so, given all that, it's very difficult to say this poem is actually by Kabir or by Tukaram or by Sant Ravidas. What we know is that their ideas are clearly anti-Brahminical, clearly against the caste system, clearly in favor of liberty and freedom of the individual, clearly against any kind of authority interfering with the individual, but not necessarily, they're not politically motivated. This is a very important element in India. We have never had enlightening movements towards politics. I know you will say we fought against the British Raj and all that, yeah, but that's a different issue. we're just borrowing ideas from elsewhere and trying to figure out our own way around. But there was nothing. We had extremely anti-enlightenment figures like Gandhi, for instance, and so there is no way in the world that our independence movement is a movement or enlightenment or anything. On the contrary, it is very much against it. Because if you look at the people who came into power, they're all aristocrats, and there is no question of any actual social justice except in the books, like in the constitution. Yeah, that's fine, but there is nothing else beyond that. On the ground there is nothing, right? So when you speak of enlightenment, it has to occur on the ground. I'm not speaking in the abstraction, everything is very nice, but in the ground it has to occur. So the radical bhakti movement was actually quite influential on the ground. They used vernacular language, right? So they did not use English and Latin and Sanskrit to talk to people. Kabir doesn't do that. Tukaram doesn't do it. They speak the language of the people. And that's why they are so popular. And that's why people are not particularly pleased with the. If you well, these people have been just co-opted by the privileged now. So it's like they have disappeared from the memory of the underprivileged whom they actually were talking about, and they have simply been co-opted by the privileged. This is another of those great geniuses of the Hindu Brahminical system. They always co-opt the enemy and make it their own. So defanging the enlightenment, so to speak, they're very good at it, I have to say. So much better than the European guys who tend to be very warlike and they don't co-opt another person's idea. They just try to fight a war with them. The Brahminical system never does that. They co-opt the idea and they say, yeah, Christ is there. He's also our own person. And Buddha, he's also avatar of Vishnu. Even Akbar was called an avatar of Vishnu by Sanskrit pundits. Because Akbar said, you write something nice for me. And so they wrote a nice a book on him saying you are the avatar and you are this and that and whatever. So the Brahminical system is very flexible that way. As long as they survive and can practice their peculiar hierarchical order, they don't care about what's coming and what's going so far as ideas are concerned. So it's an interesting system, actually. Very difficult to understand the system. It's actually quite difficult to understand. But we know what we have to do for to get enlightenment. We have to get away from these guys. Anyway, so the radical bhakti movement, I mean, there are also the Sufis, they are very important, the Veera Shaivas, the Nath yogis. These are kind of important people. But again, there is a kind of vague, not vague, but rather strong connection with religion, which is not the case with the radical enlightenment in Europe. So there's a big difference there. So in Europe, the radical and not the conservative one, the radical one was a total rejection of religion, of theology, of any kind of ritualistic life, whatever. That they rejected. They said we can't have this thing. So because it just goes against reason, it makes no sense at all. So, but in India, it kind of all the radical bhakti movements, all these people, Kabir and whatever, they have always been attributed with some guru or the other. But though that, I think these are co-optations actually. In reality, it is very difficult to say whether they are any guru at all. In reality, it's very, very difficult to say. And Gail Ombet, in her book Seeking Begumpura, clearly says this. It's very difficult to establish whether these people had any gurus at all. There is nothing like this there. But it's certainly a remarkable phenomenon. I think the radical bhakti movement is actually quite an astonishing phenomenon in India. It really should be studied very deeply by philosophy departments at least. I have not studied it, but I will try to. There's so many other things to do, but I would like to look at this quite carefully to see what these people were up to. It's interesting. It's also difficult because uh, it's not easy to figure out what was happening in history. Indian history is very complex and volatile and difficult to understand. But the larger picture is clear. If you want enlightenment and you want to locate enlightenment, as Meera Nanda says, it has to be against the Brahmanical order that prevails. That's what enlightenment is supposed to be in India. There will be other things involved. Yeah, that's fine. But that's the first step. It can't be anything else. So, okay. So the real problem in India is the Hindu Brahminical order. So India has never had an enlightenment since the HBO has never been challenged and overthrown. They have never been overthrown. They are always in power. So there is nothing you can do about it. Even if they are not in political power, they are in what might be described as ecclesiastical power. You can't get away from them. There's just no way in the world. So they determine the aspects of society. They even determine the way in which the subalterns and the Dalits and all these people think about themselves. So, in autobiographies that Dalits have written, they also say that no, you see, it is because of my karma that I am suffering, or something like that. All these ideas are so profoundly embedded in their heads that they can never escape it. The real thing is to escape this poisonous garbage doctrine of dharma and karma and whatever. These stuff has to be evaded and it has to be overthrown if you have to have any chance at an enlightenment. People have tried it. It's not that people haven't tried. In the radical bhakti movement, people genuinely tried to do something, and they are, I have to say, very intelligent, very brave people indeed. Nobody today is trying all this. I mean, it's going to be very tough to do it. But I have to say they are very, very brave people. Part of the reason may also be because we had at that time Muslim rulers, and they were like they would allow all kinds of expression. So because it didn't matter to them, they were just interested in taxing and getting tax credits and whatever. As long as that's happening, they don't really care what's happening in society. As long as there is some peace maintained, you can wander around and keep singing songs. It's just fine with them. This was also the case with the Sufis. Muslim rulers were they would allow them, but the Sufis were not entirely friendly with the Muslim rulers. So when Nizamuddin Aulia was called by the Sultan, he said that I am sorry, I can't meet you, and that's a very rare thing for any godman to say. So anyway, oh by the way, I should say something. Many people think that there was a renaissance in Bengal, which is true. There was to some extent, but that it was very influential. I'm sorry, that's not the case. It may have been influential in a very small circle of people, but the notion of an enlightenment is always a question of a large influence across a wide swathe of society. I'm not speaking of highly educated people. No, it has to be more like, does the man who is selling tea in the street, has he heard of these people? No, they haven't heard of anything. In France, that's not the case. Even farmers and peasants and whatever, they were deeply involved in what was happening in their society. They may have been confused about it, but they were deeply involved in it. But this is not the case in India. Most people, whether in Bengal or South or whatever, the general population remains in the darkness that the Hindu Brahminical order has thrown on them. It's extremely hard to come out of it. And people have made all kinds of efforts, but they have been put down with tremendous violence. So, and that seems to be the prevalent doctrine that if something ever happens against, then we just use violence to cut it down. The same thing happens today also. So I don't consider the Bengal Renaissance as anything particularly enlightening, though I think that the southern figures of resistance like Periyar are quite important. But again, we must note the failure of all movements to dislodge the sway of the Hindu Brahminical order. So the Bengal Renaissance is not really terribly against them. So against the Hindu Brahminical orders, so it's a kind of influx of European ideas and some privileged Bengali gentlemen had a good idea of what was happening. They were deeply influenced by this. They tried to fight for equality of women and against sati and whatever. We had horrible doctrines of all kinds. So and they were successful sometimes, sometimes they were unsuccessful. Clearly, they are well recognized in the country. So everybody has heard of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar and Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Yeah, but the influence of their ideas is not very evident to me at least. We need historical evidence of large scale influence. That's very important. It just can't be just like two people are following and somebody's reading their book in a college or something. That's not what I'm talking about. Large scale influence is necessary for an enlightenment. You can't have enlightenment just one person standing and nobody else can understand what he's saying, or the influence is very small in a very small circle. That can't be the case. It's like Rabindranath's influence in Bengal is simply astonishing. Everybody knows his poems. It's just amazing if you think about it. That's the sort of influence you're talking about. In what other country is a poet so well recognized as Rabindranath is? It's amazing if you think about it. So, and the number of poems he wrote, and the kind of genius he possessed, and the kind of genius by which he is recognized by everyone, even common people. I'm not speaking of recognition by Sahitya Academy or something. I'm not speaking like that. I'm speaking of common people. Do they recognize someone as a really remarkable influence on their life, such that they emulate those principles? Well, that is very true for Rabindranath, but it is not really true for Bankim or Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Yeah, right. It doesn't seem so to me. I need historical evidence for it, but yeah, they are very influential figures. But we have to make a difference between influence on very educated people and influence on general masses. Enlightenment is not just for educated people; it is all meant for masses also. So, were they able to shake the Hindu Brahmanical order? No, there is no reason to believe they were able to shake it. The Hindu Brahmanical order survives and it will continue to survive in the future. I don't see any reason to believe that it's going to disappear tomorrow. Nothing like that is going to happen. So we are still struggling for enlightenment. Uh, but well, maybe we will have our moment. Every country has some time when suddenly big things happen. So India is a kind of mixture of all kinds of forces acting against each other. So you never know what happens when. So I hope that we can have an enlightenment, but we have not had one so far. There have been scattered attempts at it. Mind you, the same thing holds for Europe. They also have had moments of enlightenment, but there has been a major fight back against it. So let me give you an example of this. Piketty, the French economist, he wrote a book called Equality. You can easily buy it on Amazon or check it in the college library. You will get it. ওটা easily পাওয়া যাবে এরকম কিছু না. So what he has written is this: the, the aristocrats used to own something like 90% of the land, not the non-priestly land, in France. Okay, that's fine. Uh, when after the French Revolution, this ownership reduced to maybe like 80 or something like that. That's not much of a reduction if you really think about it. But by 1914, that is pre First World War, they were again back to 90%. So if you look at these figures, these are important figures. They may be very boring figures. It tells you how difficult it is to have an enlightenment. Even in countries like France, which are bubbling with the public intellectuals, we don't have many public intellectuals in India. And often, if they are there, they generally just support the Brahminical order. Very few public intellectuals exist, like Meera Nanda, for instance, who does not support the Brahminical order. In my opinion, she's an extremely brilliant scholar, but how many people read her? So, the public influence is lacking. Even in France, where there is so much public influence, the aristocrats in 1914 owned 90% of the land. So you can imagine how difficult it is for the to dislodge the privileged. And in India, it is not merely the dislodging. The Brahmins they are not necessarily privileged people. That's perfectly obvious, right? So we are really fighting against the system. And if you want enlightenment, you will have to fight against it. We are fighting against a system which is not easy to understand at all. It is not a system of wealth, but it is a system of hierarchy. That's actually very difficult to fight. It's not. It's generally not easy, but well, at least the target is clear so far as fighting against wealthy privilege is concerned. But it is not at all clear to fight against hierarchy. The Buddhists tried it. Um, they were successful to some extent, but not very successful. So I remember a funny instance that I think one of the historians says this, that when they discovered the Ajanta and Ellora caves, the Buddhist paintings are there, very beautiful and everything. So they asked the Indian people, the British, they asked the Indian people, what are these things? And none of the Indian people knew anything about it. Well, that I guess I don't have to say anything else about Buddhist influence in India. There's not a single person there who stood there with the British who knew anything about those caves. They had no clue what these things were. That tells you a lot about the receding, declining, invisible influence of Buddhism in India. That enlightenment disappeared a long time back. If at all it was an enlightenment, the radical bhakti movement as well. I mean, maybe it will come back again. I think it has some power. It could even come back again, but that has fizzled out. It's very powerful still in the world. In our country, people do look up to Tukaram and Kabir and Ravidas, and these are powerful figures. These are not some small cultural figures; they're very big figures, but their message is not getting through. They are just taken as benign poets, saying some small things about rivers and saints and temples and whatever, saying nice things basically. They were not saying nice things. They were trying to smash the Hindu Brahminical order. That thing needs to be recognized. Most people don't even know this thing. So we have had our chances at radical enlightenment, but the chances are they're not percolating into the masses. If it does not percolate into the masses, uh, for all kinds of reasons, maybe non-literacy, the power of the social hierarchy in which we exist, it just somehow stops information from flowing around. So, well, I hope that we can have a radical enlightenment of some kind, but we have to still wait for it. But the target is very clear. At least in India, the target is clear, but the fight is very difficult. So so our enlightenment is yet to begin. Yeah, that's right. It's pretty much the same in Europe. Actually, they are also they have to restart their fight. Frankly speaking, so we are both in the same domain. Frankly speaking, the West and India, we again have to restart our fight. But in India, the fight has disappeared from memory. But at least in Europe, it is fresh. So at least something like that is there. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, okay,
Thank
stop.
you. Yes. Uh, Thank you very much, Professor Nilanjan Bhowmick. You have made a very illuminating discussion in this on this particular issue. We we people of philosophy often do not go to that extreme to analyze the what is behind the what the main issue of our culture, and you have rightfully identified say Hindu hierarchical order, Hindu Brahmanical Hindu order. That is the main issue. And if we have to make any type of enlightenment in a true sense of the term, we have to first fight it, and then other things will come. So you have you have started with the main idea of enlightenment. What actually it means? It means individual freedom, also social freedom at the political level, and also at the we can say in our cultural level also. But in most of the cases, we have failed because of different elements, and you have made some distinction between liberal enlightenment and radical enlightenment. It is very helpful for us to understand the whole thing. And I was of the opinion that Kant was very radical, but now it seems to me no, Kant was not also very that type of radical enlightened person. I have to say now. And regarding radical enlightenment, you have rightly pointed out the name of some great thinkers, and it will also include Marx and other followers also. And in case of English enlightenment, that we often think that the Englishman is the most enlightened people, and you have rightfully mentioned that no, the English are more conservative than other people of Europe. And they have some points in enlightenment, but there are many other things in which they are not so enlightened. And you have referred to that the pushback and after and even when you speak of the French Revolution and its aftermath, and you have rightly identified that still the same thing has come back. The 90% of the wealth is also owned by the aristocrat. And if we do not fight all these things, then there is no scope of enlightenment. And you have the most important thing about Indian enlightenment. Actually, I was very skeptical about the whole thing. What is meant by enlightenment in Indian context? And I have in mind that it meant the Vedic period in which what we call the golden age of Indian culture, etc. And that was the enlightenment. And but you have rightfully mentioned that if we do not see the authoritarianism and the religious obscurantism in task, then there is no question of enlightenment. My understanding is that this is a very interesting lecture. We are deeply benefited by this lecture of yours, I will just think of one point is that we have spoken of the influx of Western ideas has made some changes in our Indian map, Indian cultural map, and it is the same with you have spoken of Periyar, and also we can say of Jyotiba Phule, and also in case of Bengal, Ganesha, all these things are, and it is very enlightening. And then if the most important thing you have identified the large scale mass movement, large scale influence is the most important thing. Otherwise, no enlightenment will happen. But in our Hindu Brahmanical order, we are so designed mentally, spiritually, and in every terms that it is very difficult to go beyond it. And that is the most important, we can say, intellectual what I say, intellectual blockage of this type of thinking. I will just point one thing. What is the opinion about the Vedic period, the earlier Vedic period? Can we say that period was an enlightened age? And with this, I also request other speakers to raise any issue or any queries or any clarification from Professor Bhowmick. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me answer the. I think the question was whether the Vedic period is enlightened. Well, it's not individual. There's no such thing as individual emancipation there. So you go by the general framework. It's just simple. So, do we have individual emancipation? Are people free from authority? No, not really. By no means. So, look at social emancipation, zero again, right? So, what was the other cause? Political emancipation, forget it. They're just pre-modern. There's no question of political emancipation. Scientific emancipation, there's no way in the world that's even possible at that time. So, if you apply the framework I have developed, which is just based on history. So by just looking at it, it rules out the Vedic age instantly. One doesn't even have to think much about it. People were, but we have to remember that it is too much to expect the Vedic age to be enlightened. It's like expecting the Huns in Rome or somewhere to be enlightened. They don't have any conception like this. So it's too much to expect enlightened thinking amongst Vedic seers. The Vedic age, there's a good book on the Vedic age by Fritz Stahl, and he talks about the Vedas and what they are and what people are trying to do, etc. And so that's an interesting, revealing book actually. But he certainly does not think there is anything enlightening about it. There is a certain system, and they are trying to figure out the nature of the world through prayer and propitiation and ritual and whatever. And certain creations are very nice, like in the Psalm way, you put the rituals into music. And so I actually think Indian classical music is a very good example of an Indian knowledge system. So for some strange reason, no one discusses this. But anyway, maybe I'm wrong. But it seems to me that Indian classical sculpture, astronomy, that's not going to help us today because we have very
Absolutely.
powerful instruments today.
Yeah.
So, but Indian classical music is something that is very unique to us. And so it is not the same as Western classical or Vietnamese music or whatever. It's something very beautiful. And so we should really talk more about it. There's something very nice about it. It is our own creation. There is a lot of intermixture with when the Mughals came. And so a very rich system. And by the way, Rabindranath also was profoundly influential in the way in which we perceive Indian classical music today. This is what historians say. I'm not saying it, but it's what historians say. So we should really be looking at it. It's a very important thing. There's no point in looking at the Vedas. They are not knowledge systems. They are just sort of expressions of interest in nature and society and whatever. That's fine, but one does not expect them to have very sophisticated forms of knowledge. That's not really right. Yes, I think someone had a question. Yeah, please go ahead with your questions.
Hello.
Yes, I
Hello.
can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Yeah. Sure, 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 sure.
Okay, so good evening, Prof.
Professor Potit Pavan Das, uh, Dr. Nilanjan Bhowmick. This is Professor Potit Pavan Das from Ravenshaw University.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I must thank you first, Professor Bhowmick, for this wonderful talk. I have a very small and rudimentary kind of question, right? So the first one, when you define about enlightenment, and I still remind myself that enlightenment as Kant defines that this is coming out of the self-imposed immaturity,
Uh-huh.
right? And then you also pushed that to a certain extent, in fact large extent, that we should not listen to any kind of authority, we should come out of any other's guidance, this that. But my question is very rudimentary and very simple, you can say, that when we believe that we are this spark or part of a larger consciousness, then how can I become aware that I am someone different and my view is something different from others, that is authority or anyone else? So when I believe that I am the spark of a larger consciousness, a real consciousness, and if you that you can talk about in Indian context much more conspicuously, when we believe that this is I am nothing but a part of a larger consciousness, then how do I find that I am different from the authority? Right? When the difference actually goes down, elapses, then where am I and where is the authority? Where is the author? And whom I become aware of? That was this simple question.
Yeah, I mean, your that idea is a philosophical idea, and we are really talking about ideas that could make some sense to a common man. So, well, you are right that if I accept the philosophical idea that I am part of some larger consciousness, but it's very difficult to defend this, I have to say. But if you accept this idea, well, then you are not different from it. And but the problem with these ideas is that then we accept authority and we accept whatever, I mean, all the possible ills of society, because there is really no point in interfering and trying to bring about an enlightenment. Because I'm not different from the others, so to speak. Yeah, but like these ideas have actually held back social progress in India. So we need to think a little bit about that. It's fine to believe it if you believe it on very strong grounds of reasoning, but not everybody believes this. Secondly, even amongst philosophers, people do disagree with each other on this issue as to whether I'm a part of a larger consciousness. I don't believe that definitely. But because I don't have a reason for it. There are good reasons for it, by the way. It's not like there are no reasons for it. There are actually decent, interesting reasons, but hard to believe reasons. But if you believe in all these things and are happy to believe them, then that doesn't help in social progress. Also, even if I believe them, I can actually come out and do something for social progress. Because after all, if I am the other, and if I'm nothing different from them, then I should not be believing in hierarchy or anything like that. But people who actually believe in all these doctrines, they also believe very strongly in social hierarchy. So, as is quite clear from history, by the way, so my talk depends a good deal on history. I am not discussing philosophy here. The philosophy is a very different thing. We are discussing history here. What is the historical evidence of enlightenment in our country? The answer is not much. Whatever evidence we have is Buddhism and the radical bhakti movement. The radical bhakti movement sometimes has these ideas that you are expressing, but they also express a certain lack of interest in social hierarchy. So when the Hindu Brahminical order says that okay, we are part of a larger consciousness, this that, well, yeah, all right, but there's no reason for other people to believe them. They're just simply saying something, or maybe they're just talking to each other. So that doesn't help anybody else. What we have to see, and also they don't believe it in their practice, by the way. So if they actually believed it in their practice, we would not have social hierarchy. We would immediately have enlightenment. So at least a certain kind of social emancipation would take place. But nothing like this has ever taken place. So indeed, the situation is quite bad. If you, I don't know if you have heard of a experiment by Harvard scholars. They had come to India to look at how people work together in India in a small office. So, and they conducted some experiments, and it's bad. I mean, it's just, if you put the same caste together, then they tend to work better. But if you put different castes into the same room and give the same work to them, they actually work much more worse. And that tells you instantly why Indian society is finding it so hard to function economically. They were testing economic doctrines. So, and that's a very convincing case for thinking that our social hierarchies are quite bad, whatever our philosophical ideas may be. If I believe that I'm part of higher consciousness, that doesn't help me in any progress in making social progress or economic progress or whatever. So, but of course, we can believe that there's nothing. But we know for very well that if we believe these things, that doesn't lead to social progress or economic progress. That's very clear. We have excellent empirical evidence for it, and these things have actually been empirically investigated. And quite a lot of economic work exists on it now, especially after the Harvard team had visited. Lots of people have performed these experiments, including Indian economists. They have always come out with the same results. The things are quite bad indeed. So this is not a question of what I philosophically believe. It's a question of what we believe the masses should be like, and what we believe about the social hierarchy. Do we believe that there is a hierarchy to be maintained? If we don't believe it, that's very good. If we do believe it, then our philosophical thoughts and our social hierarchy thoughts are distinct from each other. And that's how it has been, by the way, in the Hindu Brahmanical order. They do have great philosophical thoughts, but their social behavior is very different. And so, or it is simply disengaged from the hierarchical, from the philosophical thoughts that they have. So, it appears to me that if I think that if I am part of a larger consciousness, that's of no relevance to the notion of an enlightenment. It's an individually enlightening thing, but that's not sort of enlightenment that is of any interest to historians, for instance, or to sociologists, or even to philosophers.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for this answer. I may be excused for another intervention. So, in that case, two things I must mention first. The first one is the way the word enlightenment has been used, either in Western intellectual climate, or if you focus in Indian climate. So that is purely philosophical, and we should not use that word for social progress or social emancipation. Later we can say this is social emancipation. And second one is, I believe that when I understand that I am the part of a larger whole, that gives more egalitarian society than a hierarchical society. That belief actually is a foundation for more egalitarian society, isn't it? Second thing. And third thing is, it's not my belief or your belief. Enlightenment is always connected with reason. And what reason says? The reason says that if the foundation is monism, or a monistic idea or behavior, that there is only one consciousness, one identity, then that gives egalitarian society, then an hierarchical society, isn't it? That is a pure, very practical and pure logic or reasoning. So I should be excused if I understand in that way. Thank you very much for your response. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
know that the time is less. Yeah.
it's good that you're asking that question. A lot of people actually say this, that we believe in monism, we are part of the same thing, whatever. Yeah, but that's right. But remember, for 2000 or more than 2000 years, in spite of all these beliefs, we practice a horrendous caste system. Why do we do it? If it doesn't stand to reason, then why do we do it? It means that ours, the establishment of the social hierarchy is a fundamental tenet of the Hindu Brahmanical order, whatever their philosophical ideas may be. Enlightenment is not a set of philosophical ideas. They are philosophical ideas, of course, but they are not divorced from reality. It's perfectly obvious if you look at India that we are a profoundly inegalitarian society. Even though we all believe that we are all part of the same consciousness, Brahman is there, this, that, yeah, that's fine. But we are all clear believers, or at least we have a majority of population who are clear believers of social hierarchy. Even the people who fight against Brahminism believe in social hierarchy. That's the amazing aspect of the Indian society. So our beliefs are clearly divorced from what we may theologically or philosophically believe. Our social behavior is very distinct. It's the social behavior that we need to attack. Nobody is attacking the philosophical thing. You can believe whatever you wish in philosophy. By enlightenment, what we mean is there are certain things we have to establish. We have to see that people don't follow authority blindly. We have to go for social emancipation. We have to go for political emancipation, and we have to go for scientific emancipation. Apart from that, if you wish to believe in monism, that's fine. Nobody is objecting to that. But what we are objecting to is the hierarchical system that we have. That's what we are objecting to. It's fine. You can believe whatever you wish, but that belief has nothing to do with. It has everything apparently to do with believing in the social hierarchy. Lots of people believe that the social hierarchy thing is accidental, contingent. Yeah, but it exists, and it is a necessary part of Hindu society. If I don't believe, actually, I have believed this for a very long time. If I don't believe in the caste system, then I am not a Hindu.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I am requesting Professor Santosh Kumar Pal to say something or to conclude, sir, please.
Yes, I was sometimes out of link. So, because this discussion is very, very interesting. And still, I also share with Professor Bhowmick that we have still a soft corner for Varnavad. Not only that, and some people, even today, like us, they also say that Jatpat is bad, but Varnavad is okay. That is very, very problematic for going beyond that. And if you could not go beyond Varnavad, and how can the hierarchy be tackled? So this is a very difficult task for India. We can just say that these are Western, these are Indian, all these things you can do it. You can make some excuse for that. But still, it is true that and in this context, the reason or if I say rationality, scientificity, all these things, that has some objective standard. And if we deny this, that will not solve the problem. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Bhowmick. I am at least very much enlightened with your lecture. Thank you very much.
I wish I had more time to prepare actually, but thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes. It is very enlightening, and we men often see the same thing in a cyclical order, and do not try to think in another way. And you have done it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. So with this, we are leaving saying goodbye to all of you. Good evening, good night, and I am leaving with this. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, sir.